To me, grit is really about being faced with adversity or getting hit with something and not collapsing under the weight of it, but being able to come back not only to baseline, but to go above baseline based on training, based on that strength that you've built. And resilience and grit isn't about putting on armor to protect yourself. That's where I think the hustle culture gets it wrong.
Right.
You can't power your way through that. It takes reps. And the same thing with grit. When you get hit with something, you eventually learn and you become stronger in how you not react to what's going on, but respond. And you're able to recover faster. I'm Eric, and I'm a renegade.
Welcome to another episode of the RUNEGADE Podcast. Each episode, we practice the lost art of conversation to better understand what it means to run, be a runner, to endure. Today, we are joined by Eric Hodgdon, better known as the Grit Guy. Eric spent years building a solid career in IT, the kind that most people would call successful. Then grief walked through the door and quietly dismantled everything he thought he knew about strength. Instead of armored up and pushing through, he chose to respond honestly, openly, and with tremendous courage. That choice turned him into one of the most clear-eyed resilience coaches and storytellers we've ever met. In this conversation, Eric shares how storytelling became his medicine, how real grit is built by not hardening up, but by learning to respond, and why the most powerful way forward is often the most vulnerable. If you're a runner, a high achiever, or anyone right now walking through your own storm, this one's for you. Let's welcome the Grit Guy, Eric, to the show. Welcome to another episode of the RUNEGADE Podcast. Each episode, we have a conversation with the best guests to help you and us understand what it means to run, be a runner. I'm Todd Marentet, and with me is
Uncle Mark. Great to be here, Todd. As always, how are you doing? You got Hyena today, or is it? No, that's...
I got the Go Brewing. Go Brewing. This is a new school sour.
Play on the old school with the new school. I like it. How's it taste? How sour? How sour is it?
It's really sour, but it's wonderful. And kudos to our buddy Rich Roll for introducing us to Go Brewing. Thank you, Rich.
Rich, I appreciate it. Though I am still slinging the Sleeman Zero lager with electrolytes because I felt that I was electric dart today, so needed to be electrolyte up with these electrolytes. So
I love it.
Here we are.
Whether you're out running with your crew or talking to the Grit Guy, there's always a good non-alcoholic brew.
There's a
I was so close to rhyming.
There's a Go Brew for you. There you go. What rhymes with grit? If you want something that doesn't taste like, and you're hanging out with a guy who is full of grit, there's a
whether you're out enjoying a conversation with the Grit Guy or running with your crew, there's a Go Brewing for you.
I like it. We'll take it. We'll take it.
Onwards and upwards.
Sponsors, if you are wanting one of our clever poems that may not follow convention, we've got.
And you know what? You mentioned our sponsors. For our listeners, if you're looking for the best fuel, electrolytes, protein, greens, check out Thrive Protein. Joe and Jillian, they make the best protein and nutrition out there. We love Thrive Protein. Check them out and use the code
Renegade.
For something off your order. I think it's 20%. I think it is. We should really check that out.
I know. Let's, yeah. I don't think it's more than 20. It might not be less than 10. Somewhere.
Don't hold us to it. Don't hold us to it, Joe and Jillian, if we get in trouble.
You'll get some money off, and you'll be happy.
Exactly. All right.
Eric, how you doing?
Todd and Mark.
Eric, how you doing?
Good to meet you guys.
Good to meet you too. How's the day going for you?
It's good. I have been at a co-working space for most of the day and kind of split my time between here and home. So yeah, gotcha. I'm really, I'm loving Loving this time of year too.
Good. And where are you dialing in from today?
I'm dialing in from the coast of Maine.
Coast of Maine.
So I'm about not even, I'd say I could, a football field away from a spot where they build the Aegis destroyers for the Navy. It's
Wild.
a place called Bath Iron Works, and it's been part of Maine's big economy here for the last probably 30, 40 years. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Great. Well, we're here in Ontario, so just a little north of the border there, not far. Where I think, Todd, you're probably the same distance, just in a different direction from Detroit there. So about 45 minutes to an hour away from Detroit. So nice to meet you. I'm Mark. I'm the part of the podcast in bringing like the new runner's perspective to it. Todd is the seasoned veteran now. Todd, right? He's
means I'm
been
old.
out there. He's been around for a while, but what led you to become a resilience coach and how you became the grit guy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. This is honestly something I never thought I'd be doing. I was a career IT guy. Somebody had a problem with their laptop or their computer or their audio, I was called. And I had a team of guys that I worked with over several organizations. And this is a 20 plus year career in IT. And I always thought that was going to be my life. I just the American dream, get a job, work until retirement, retire and find a place to retire to and enjoy those last remaining years of your life. And I think life doesn't happen the way you expect it to happen. I remember in 2012, I was invited to join Beachbody as a coach. And just as a little tidbit, I was the very first success story for P90X back in 2004, that popular program. In fact, you guys had a guy on a year ago, Mark Sisson,
yes,
who was very connected to the Beachbody and P90X development. And so it was nice to see that podcast of his. I was listening to that earlier today. But after I earned that first success story, my marriage broke down. And about 6 months later, I went through a divorce. I stepped back from everything. I stopped working out. I stopped taking care of myself. I had no coping skills. And it was then that I was introduced to a high performance therapist, because I was just in a place that I was struggling so much with trying to just make it day to day that I needed to get out of the hole that I was uncomfortably comfortable in that hole. And I stayed there for about 3 years, and it really took a lot of work. I never went on any medication, anything like that. It was all talk therapy. But when I started to come out of that, I started to get back into taking care of myself, getting back into doing another round of P90X over and over, going over to Insanity. Like, you remember those programs back in the day, right? And in 2012, I was invited to join the network as a coach. In that case, it was kind of a distributor type of role. And I jumped at it. It was an immediate way for me to potentially get out of the 9-to-5, because I had heard from other coaches and other leaders that they were able to earn enough money to step away from a 9-to-5 and run this coaching business, if you will, this distribution business on their own. I'm like, I want that. I don't know about you guys, but when you hear that you can potentially leave a 9-to-5, there's something that clicks on inside of you. Well, that coincided with me having to take custody of my 15-year-old daughter, Zoe, and her older sister. And that kicked off an 18-month just roller coaster of events, adolescent hospital units, suicidal ideation, struggles, just all sorts of challenges. And it was a roller coaster. And in early January of 2014, my daughter Zoe took her life. I didn't know what was going on from a standpoint of, it's a bomb that drops in your life. How do you even deal with that setback compared to, had nothing to, I'm looking back when I was going through my divorce and I had no coping skills. The one thing I did have at this point, even though it was 7 years later, was that I had some coping skills to help me at least get through the next day to the next day to the next day. Mm-hmm. And very shortly after Zoe died, her friends came to me and said, what do we do with this? And I'm struggling so much, I don't know what to do with this. But I did say to them, look, under no circumstances is anybody following suit, because we're going to find a way to get through this together. And that may sound like a cliched statement. It's the only thing I could think of saying at that point. But what I did find is over the course of the next few months, if I discovered anything about how to deal with a particular part of grief, I shared it with her friends. And if they figured out something, they shared it with me. And oftentimes her friends just reached out because they were struggling. One of her friends came forward and said to me, I was considering taking my life, but I saw what this did and I can't do that. But that was a breakthrough for her in a way, getting out of that mode of despair and struggle. And I would say probably about 2 years after I lost Zoe, I was still coaching with the Beachbody organization. And look, there's something about those types of organizations where women are really good at building relationships by default. Guys, are you going to buy something for me? Like we don't, we have a hard time approaching, real connection. Some do, some don't. But I was in that place where that was a skill that I needed to learn. And so there was an invitation to join other men's coaches down in Dallas for an event. It was a leadership event for Beachbody. And so while we were there, I was introduced to a gentleman named Bo Eason, who is a storytelling coach. Fantastic, fantastic coach and mentor. And he shared the story of, he was a former NFL pro. His brother, Tony Eason, was the Patriots quarterback in the mid 80s. And Bo played for the Oilers for 4 seasons. Then he went over to the San Francisco 49ers for his last season. But after 7 leg injuries, he finally had to retire. Then he learned how to become a playwright, and he wrote a one-man play. He was on off Broadway for, I think, 18 months doing a one-man show. And then this is an autobiographical show where he was basically telling his story. And so he transitioned into a story coach, and that's how I was meeting him at that point as a story coach, because I wanted to tell my story of Zoe and navigating grief, not to dump on people, mm-hmm. but to show them that in life, when you have setbacks, you can get back up. And so over the course of the next few years, I started to learn how to tell my story, and I had a lot of people coming to me to help them through their grief, to navigate them through their grief. And that's essentially when the Grit Guy was born. And that's where I was forged, if you will, right? You go through those trials and tribulations, and you finally figure out what it is that you're here for, the purpose. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we got here.
Wow. And I imagine that in working through counseling grief and helping people to overcome these these moments in life that you feel that there's no other option, there must be certain commonalities, but each situation is also unique. So mm-hmm. How have you navigated that, where it's not all with the same brush by any means? It's that personal contact with that person. But how have you what are some of the learnings over the years that you've developed and have been able to apply to that?
That's a great question. First and foremost, what's personal is universal. You just hit the nail on the head when you said that, similar situations, but each one is unique to us. I like to consider that grief and loss is like a fingerprint, right? There are similarities between all our fingerprints, but each one is unique to us. And so what's personal is universal is so important, because in that commonality, in that that storytelling of what you've navigated in life, you see a lot of heads nodding north and south. Like when I share my story of losing my daughter, there's other people that go, we think autobiographically anyway. That's how we make meaning of our lives in this world, is through story. And so it's really important that in storytelling, it actually heals us. It heals our brains. It helps us to reassemble what has been blown apart. And it doesn't matter what it is that we're sharing a story on. Obviously, this podcast is focused around running, but all the stories that are shared by each guest that you have, it doesn't matter what they do. What's personal is universal. So even though I'm not an active runner myself, I can resonate and relate to the stories that Mark Sisson tells, that other guests share. And I think that commonality is what also brings people together, especially in the storytelling. So, yeah.
Eric, as you're sharing that, conventional wisdom that we always hear when we experience a loss or we experience a tribulation is time heals all wounds. But what's the unconventional truth that you've come to realize or discovered that helped you move forward and help others move forward universally?
Yeah, no, again, I love your questions, guys. These are fantastic. What I've learned here is that time is not the driver of your healing. It is a companion, right? It is a companion that, yes, time is part of this equation, but when it comes down to it, we have to be the ones that take the steps forward. And the challenging part is that when a lot of folks are going through a major setback in life, we do kind of slip into an abyss of survival. And you try to come right out of that, but that's not the way that it works. If you avoid it and you just kind of go hit the exit door and just kind of push it down, it's going to come back. You're going to wind up back in that pit until you actually take the necessary steps to get yourself out of that. The way I like to think about it as well is that the ultra marathoners, the ones that run these 50, 60 mile, courses that are, it's like a Spartan race on steroids, right? And that I don't want to disparage those races. I don't want to disparage the ultra marathoners in any way, but it is the only way they're going to get from there to the end of this marathon is just taking the next step forward. They're tired. They're exhausted. They want to quit. They want to give up. But the one thing I know about these is that this is it's nobody lets the other person quit, because if they do, then, there's something that happens inside of us that it's profound. And it really, we're not designed to be that way. We are designed to get back up, survive, and keep moving forward. And there's some little story I can tie with that. There's a gentleman named Scott Mann. He's a former Green Beret, my former boss and former coach as well. He was asked to come up and speak to the Spartan Ultra runners up in Vermont during one of their races. Now, this race apparently has a 50% attrition rate. People drop out halfway through because it's that tough. When he was up there and he spoke to them, he told them that whenever you're struggling in a situation like this, when you want to give up, you look to the person to your left, look into the person to your right, and you just say, "How are you doing?" And then what happened in that particular race is that there was a 90% plus finish rate, Scott was never asked to come back again and speak, because the whole point is to be challenged, but it becomes something that's internal with your mind. And it is about, you're not alone on this journey. Right. And so, yeah, I hope that helps.
It does help. And you know what? You bring up the marathon and the ultra marathoners. And, when you think about those races, if it's your first one, you're completely overwhelmed because you're overwhelmed by the event and what you assigned the event to be. And as you get more seasoned, you find that it's always about that next step, that next step. So when folks will say, well, how do you actually run a 50-mile race? You say, well, I just run 51-mile races. And
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to do that. To your earlier comment about time is you're trying to make time irrelevant. You're just trying to be as quick and stay as in the exact moment that you're in. So, hey, if I'm going to just run to that next tree, that
Mm-hmm.
next, that signpost, I know for the runners listening, when they tie their, I guess, success or their achievement to the outcome of I'm going to be a marathoner, I'm going to qualify for Boston, that's when they start to get a little bit of into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
What have you come across from coaching and from your experiences to help folks understand that right mindset, the right mindset of enjoy the moment and don't get lost in a performance outcome?
Mm. Yeah, no, there's something that I'm reminded of, and it's The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you've read that book or not. It's a very
Yes.
powerful book. But, the future isn't here, and the past has already happened. The only thing that we have access to is this moment right now. And when you really think about this moment right now, and with all the things that are going on in the world, with all the things that are going on in your life, if you sit and you just take an assessment of what's going on inside, that's the power of now, the total presence. And when you just kind of sit in that feeling of what's going on inside, you'll find that there's nothing really going on right now, that it's peaceful. Yes, there's moments when things do happen, but those are moments. And we choose to hold on to those past moments, which become anchors for us in our lives. And so, like you're saying, very, very much so, like runners, that it's a series of 1 mile,
Yep.
runs that they're doing in a marathon. And I love that approach because I think it's so powerful. But the only thing that a runner can do is just take that next step as they're running. I've watched a couple of the Boston marathons myself, being here in New England, and I was just amazed at just the concentration, the focus of some, even when their bodies were failing them. People having to potentially want to drop out or crawl across the finish line. Man, that's powerful, because the only thing they had to do is just keep moving that one step forward to get across the line. Even if it took them 8 hours to finish the race, that feeling of being able to accomplish that is just really powerful. And so that's the power of not giving up.
I was going to ask you about like the power of not giving up.
Yes.
You're the grit guy. So what does grit actually really mean to you? And where
Mm.
does the hustle culture, where are they getting it wrong?
Mm. To me, grit is really about being faced with adversity or getting hit with something and not collapsing under the weight of it, but being able to come back not only to baseline, but to go above baseline based on training, based on that strength that you've built. And resilience and grit isn't about putting on armor to protect yourself. That's where I think the hustle culture gets it wrong. That they feel like, oh, hey, I want to be successful in the next 30 days with whatever I'm doing, whether it's wanting to play a sport or wanting to learn a guitar, music, right? Anything of that nature, learning a new skill. But you can't power your way through that. It takes reps. And the same thing with grit. When you get hit with something, you eventually learn and you become stronger in how you not react to what's going on, but respond. And you're able to recover faster. So there's a framework that I learned years ago that is very powerful. And it was a great example of what really happens when resilience is tested in your life. And it kind of tells you where you are. And what typically happens in life, think about a time when something has happened and that was a trigger for you. And when you get triggered, you go on what's known as a trip. You start to just go downhill. And that downhill could last days, it could last hours, it could last years. But at some point, there is a tell. And that tell is when you realize that you've been sliding, and it's not working for you any longer. So you take a turn and you start to head back up and you train your way out of that hole. And then you get back to a baseline to where you were, but I don't know, there's something about that's not good enough any longer. And you go a little bit higher than that. Now you've trained out of that. And now your strength is so much bigger and higher than it was at baseline before you went through that process. And sometimes the harder the setback, the higher you recover on the other side of it. And that's not something I think a lot of people recognize, or they don't give it enough credibility that they've been able to move through something like that. No matter what that setback is, it could be a lost job, it could be a lost relationship, it could be a loss of a loved one. Some people lose their minds if they lose their wallet. But I think the biggest piece and some of the biggest losses that we don't take into account is the loss of ourselves over the course of just a journey. You know, we could be in a relationship and just not be ourselves at all. We don't know what's going on. Maybe it's the other person. So anyway, I think you build resilience. I believe you build resilience when you are, when you train out of that turn and you come out the other side. Yeah.
Well, along those lines, like, think back here after you lost your daughter, Zoe. What was the biggest myth about grief that you had to unlearn? Like, and looking back, how did that like unlock who you became today?
I think all the resources you see online, and maybe even so today, is that the focus is on survival only. You hear the term a lot. I'm a grief survivor. I'm a suicide survivor. I'm a survivor. Well, isn't survival supposed to be temporary? And so when I was navigating the loss of Zoe, and I had moments when I started to feel better than I was just surviving, I felt guilty about it. No, wait a minute. If I don't feel bad about this, then I must not have loved Zoe. That's an internal limiting belief that you have. It's a myth. I now don't believe that is the case. I believe that if the situation was reversed, I believe that I would want Zoe to live as much as possible. And I have a feeling that she wants me to live as much as possible. And that if I keep myself in survival mode, that's a self-imposed prison. And I have the ability to reach through the bars and unlock the door, but it can be scary. And so I do believe there is a process and a way to navigate your way from survival mode to getting back up and then ultimately living beyond the loss, no matter what that loss may be.
I think framing it in that way really does allow people to put in perspective for themselves too, because I would 100% agree. I've got two daughters, and if it was reversed, I would want them to flourish, and I would want them to, take the learnings that I was able to provide them during my time with them, and continue to grow exponentially and live a long, fulfilling life. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that really does put things into perspective. And, having friends and family who have worked through their own trauma and loss.
Mm,
I think that's a component that is, when you're providing support, that it's something key that can help change that perspective. So in
yes.
something like that, and a question that I was going to ask earlier too, before I started having all these tech issues. So thank you for bearing with me on that. Or
Very good.
you mentioned that a friend of Zoe's shared with you that at one point she was thinking about taking her life as well. Was
Yes.
there a sense of urgency then on your side where it's okay? I think your response to her was that, like, we're not going to let this happen. But
Hmm.
for you to equip yourself with the skills and tools and anything possible in terms of being able to provide that guidance, or just being able to provide that support in a way that kind of takes them under your wings too as well, and supports their parents too as well. And I imagine you'd have to open up to their parents too to say, hey, let's, as a team, let's approach this. But how else did you tackle that situation? Because
Mm.
that's a lot to take on while you're working through your own process.
Yeah, and it goes back as well to that question you asked earlier as well, Mark, where you're, hey, what's the commonalities here?
Mm-hmm.
6 months after Zoe took her life, one of her hospital friends lost her younger sister to suicide, and in the town next to us, and the family wanted me to be around, and it was very strange because yes, I'm only 6 months into my grief, but they're very fresh with it. But I recognized where they were at. And I just shared with them that, right now it is absolutely the hardest. You're trying to make sense of what happened and why. And the same thing with Zoe's friend that came to me. I appreciate her sharing that, but we kept on asking why. Why did this happen? Why did Zoe do this? And I've learned from a friend of mine that why is not the answer, the question to ask, because that's never going to be answered. I'm never going to know fully. But the question you can ask and answer is what? What am I going to do about this myself? What is the next thing that I'm going to do? If that means that I'm just going to survive this next hour and get through this next hour, then that's what I'm going to do. If I'm going to go upstairs and cry for 2 hours straight, that's what I'm going to do. Because as much as I want to ask why, and we all, again, we're meaning seeking creatures, we're never going to know why this has to happen. Why we lose anybody, actually. It doesn't even have to be about suicide. It can just be, when we experience setbacks. If you lose, maybe you have a dream job, Mark, and you're like, okay, I I love this. This is the favorite thing. And then the next day you get canned, you get laid off. And you're just, why did this happen? I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know what you're putting yourself in a spot where that time reference is going to be more true than anything else. That time will be a driver only if you allow it to be a driver, meaning you'll be there for a long time. And so it's really important to ask the right question in a situation like that. And that's kind of what I shared with Zoe's friend. Like, how about we do this? What if we just check in with each other every day for the next week? I'll message you. You can let me know what's going on, whether good, bad, or otherwise, and we'll talk. How about that? Would that work for you? Yes. And we did that. And every day it just felt, for both of us, it helped both of us to navigate that difficult spot because it was something we could look forward to in the heaviness of what we were feeling. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
That's right.
I didn't get a chance to see the blood moon the other morning. I was trying to wake up early enough to go out and see it, but I missed. Did you see it? Are you an early riser?
So I live along the coast of Maine. I have I'm renting a place with a buddy of mine, and it's literally 100 feet away from the ocean.
How beautiful.
And I grew up in this area where I'm at, and it was always a dream of mine to live out in the water. And so at night, because there's not many people live on this island. It's connected with a road, of course, but there's about 800 people that live on the island year round. And obviously in the summertime, it's a big tourist spot. So about 2,500 people then, fill in. But it's so away from any light pollution that at night, if it's clear out, I can see the Milky Way. It is insane, the detail, the amount of stars. And so to answer your question the other night when I was, it started to, the eclipse started, I think around 1:30 or 2. And I got up at some point and I looked out the window and I couldn't crane my neck quite high enough, but I did see that it was starting to really get dark. I love these eclipses. They're just beautiful, and grateful I can experience them.
Absolutely. And you know what, this is actually a nice segue as well, where what about the environment and like natural elements that you've leaned upon for whether it's solace or just one of the things that my wife has always said whenever she was going through anything challenging in life, like she would drive out to the water and just stare at the waves coming in. So in your learnings and what you do even personally, sounds like that's a part of it, that you've moved and you've have a place on the water now. Is that part of your ingredients of helping to cope and helping to move through grief as well? Like,
it is. Yeah, it really is, because it just gives us I say it every single day when I drive home, if it's after dark or if it's light out, I get out of the car and I'm like, thank you for letting me live here. Because where I live I live in the area of Maine is called Casco Bay. And there's a series of islands, but not just islands themselves, but besides the beauty of the water, there are probably 25 to 30 different trails that are outside. And whenever I'm out in nature, I feel like I'm reconnecting with myself. Because when I was growing up in a town nearby, I loved being out in the woods. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And I know any time in my life where I have struggled to get grounded again, the only thing that seems to help is getting out in nature, because that's who we are at our core. We are, technically animals, but, we are meant to be connected to the earth and to the environment. And if you spend all your time indoors with the shades closed, that isolation that can be damaging in a lot of ways. It can be dangerous, because that just perpetuates more loneliness. But when you're out in nature, and even though you're not by yourself, you are connected to something pretty powerful. So I definitely use that as part of my recovery. Even today, I use it as part of just my weekly regimen. And I have just a set of trails that I typically walk on, but it's always same thing. It's always a different experience, even though it's the same trail, because the environment, the weather, the conditions of the trail itself, it's just, the people there, it's just wonderfully dynamic. It's just a beautiful thing. So I always love taking part in that, because it's always a new experience. Yeah.
The Runegade is proud to be sponsored by Thrive Protein. Power your runs and fuel your endurance with Thrive Protein, the premier Canadian-made supplement brand crafted for endurance athletes. This family-owned brand uses a science-based approach to develop high-quality electrolytes, a carbon electrolyte powder, creatine, vegan protein powders, whey protein, and they are constantly innovating. Recently brought to market EnduraFuel, hydration and fuel all in one. Each serving offers 30 grams of carbs in a 2-to-1 ratio of glucose to fructose. You also get the sodium, potassium, the calcium, and the magnesium, replenishing all the elements that you're sweating out during your efforts. It gives your body the energy it needs to perform at its peak. Plus, the lemonade flavor tastes amazing. Thrive is perfect for any athlete chasing any distance. Visit thriveprotein.ca and use the code RUNEGADE for 20% off your order. Thrive Protein. Fuel your relentless pursuit of adventure. I'm smiling and nodding because, a couple summers ago, I went through something pretty rough, and there was so much truth in that. All I wanted to do was head out for a walk, go to the water and sit down. And we live in a very nice area too, and I like to run outside. But when I was experiencing that, I couldn't explain the draw. It was just like, disconnect from everything, just go out for your walk, head down to the water and just sit there and stare at the water. And that's the only time I really kind of felt better. And I want to go back to something that you were saying, Eric. It's about helping others. So you helped your daughter's friends. And I think for definitely the running community, as you get towards more the trail runners and ultra runners, they're really good at helping each other. And what we found is when you stop thinking about yourself and you can focus on helping somebody else, you can move through the race, the run, whatever challenge you are, much quicker. Is that a truth that you've come to know?
Yes. And going back to the sharing of what Scott Mann said to the runners up at that Spartan Ultra, that was the proof that is exactly how humans help each other no matter what situation they're in. In this world, we live in a very transactional world. At this point, as my former coach, Scott Mann, would say, we're modern brains living in we're primitive brains living in a modern world. And so we're trying to make sense of this transactional world where our DNA is so rooted in, primal instincts, fire, storytelling, connection, relationships. And I think that that's where we actually thrive in no matter, even in struggle or in challenge, we thrive when we are going back to that primal part of ourselves that just knows that I need to connect with somebody else. And I know that I need to be around other people. And it's amazing what can happen with a relationship. Even if you don't know somebody, we're all wired the same way. So, let me get an example. Let's say you're driving down the road and you see a car accident. What a lot of people do, they pull over and they help. They don't know the person potentially, but we just know instinctively that we want to help our fellow humans. That, to me, supersedes any type of news or rhetoric or whatever you want to call it that we see today. That at our base level and our foundation is that we are, humans that care about other people. And so the more that we can connect with other people, again, connect as if our life depends on it. It's another thing my coach, Scott Mann, would say, connect as if our life depends on it. Amazing things can happen. And you're just not the same person again. So, yeah.
I was going to ask you something along those lines. Okay. So the grit guy, I love your videos. You got these great little eye-catching videos. Some of your videos talk about high achievers, high performers, and then the classic corporate world meeting expectation, right? So this runners have jobs. Hopefully they work most likely in corporate life.
Right.
And they get the dreaded meet expectation. That's kind of like showing up to the race that you trained for.
Right.
And you miss your goal. You're just super disappointed.
Right.
But where I was going with this, is there like the human element where you take a human who are thriving to help each other, we're thriving for community to find our tribe, and then you put them into a corporate structure, a corporate life, where it's about high performance, being the best. And then we wonder why folks sometimes struggle. So how do you go about helping the folks who come to you as a performance coach to help them get unstuck or get them to unlock their next level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it goes back to reconnecting with themselves. when you are in a corporate environment for 10, 20, maybe even 30 years, you're actually grieving an unlived life. And so the moment that you can reconnect with your nature, with what you are here to do, impactful, purposeful, meaningful, there's something very powerful about that that tends to make you question, just, okay, yes, I have to have a paycheck because I have to feed myself and my family and keep the lights on and keep, the house going and the family moving forward. But at what cost? And so when you have this culture, the hype culture, the pressure that a lot of corporate leaders are facing this day to perform at higher rates over and over again, and they either get a meets expectations or they get what's known as a dry promotion, where the title comes and the workload comes, but the pay doesn't change. That's now cognitive dissonance. You've kind of put yourself in that cognitive dissonance state where you're just trying to figure out, well, this doesn't seem right, but I can't just up and quit, because that's a real risk that a lot of people can't take. And so it's really important that your vision, what you see your life to be, and I'd like to say this, if you and I were coaching, Todd, I would be like, so if a girl, if a girl could dream,
I dream.
Let's imagine it's a year from now, and you are doing something that just is something you've been thinking about either for the last few years or your entire life, that just seems so impactful and meaningful and purposeful. And maybe this is it, but for the sake of this conversation, maybe it's that you've been in a corporate environment for 20 years. You've been doing your job. You do it great. You get great results, but you've got this pull to be doing something different, to be making that impact with somebody else, even if it's just one person. But imagine you're able to step into that role fully within a year, and you wake up in the morning and you don't have to rush out of the house for a commute, and you don't have to answer emails at night or on the weekends, and you don't have to, take personal time off only when the company says you can, because there's an important deadline which never stops, right? These deadlines never stop. But imagine that you're fully connected with yourself and doing exactly what you feel is the right, meaningful, purposeful work that you're here for. I said earlier in our conversation, I could have been the IT guy that worked until retirement, and I could have done it, and I would have done it probably. But I do think that there are moments in our lives when we have these pivotal shifts, and we can either take that as a tap on the shoulder that things can potentially move in a different direction, or we can ignore it and just get right back into what we were doing. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the author. His name is Stephen Pressfield. He wrote a book called The War of Art. And he talks a lot about resistance and how that shows up in our lives. And I'm so grateful that in my over the years of learning from wonderful mentors about storytelling and leadership, to be introduced to Stephen Pressfield, and understanding what's really going on in my life when I'm just living this transactional, shallow, non-meaningful life. I'm just going through the motions. And I think that wears people out. But I think the wake-up call is that meets expectations, that they're just not being valued like they think they are. And I had a VP reach out to me a few months ago, and very discreet, upset because she had been in this role for years, and she had just done so much for the organization to not only save them money, but to actually triple their revenue over the course of several quarters. And she got a meets expectations on her review. She could not understand how that was even possible. But she quickly realized that that was just the reality in today's life, that you are a cog in the wheel.
And sometimes with certain people, certain groups, organizations, it's having that job for another year is that reward, right? And where people feel like, they are feeling stuck and tied to it. And that meets expectations when you're sacrificing family life, personal time,
Yes.
and all of that it's
100%.
really the currency you need to factor into everything. It's not just what you've done for the company, but what you've missed out on.
Exactly.
Right. So
yeah, you can't, it's so hard to miss out on the moments that you can't get back. I mean, after I lost Zoe, that was a very quick realization. I remember it took me about 3 months before I went back to work, Mark. And I remember the second day back, I got a call from the VP of R&D. He wanted his cell phones. I worked for a company that tested software, their own in-house software, and he needed his iPhones. And I told him, they're on back order. They were just released from Apple, blah, blah, blah. He just lost his mind. I'm going to go to the CEO and tell them that IT is not helping me. And I hung up the phone. I'm like, you know what? Is that really what matters most in life right now? Your cell phones? I get it. It's your job.
Mhm.
I know you care. But at the end of the day, what matters most? And it's family. It's enjoying the moments that you can't get back.
That's right. And I've heard that
And
with
it's
organizations too, where somebody coming back after suffering a loss, and it takes time to get back into the swing of things, and even still, it's the compassion, the time, the just the respect of allowing that person to kind of reintegrate into that corporate world again. Just there needs to be a certain level of patience there, and when you don't hear that's being granted, it's really tough, right? And
well, I just want to clarify that the company itself was fantastic when I went through this loss. Most companies have bereavement policies of maybe a week or 2 weeks. Doesn't matter who passed away. And the expectation is that you're back at your desk and you're operating at the same level that you operated before the loss. I don't know how that's possible. It took me 3 months. And not only did the company cover my paycheck, and I had only been there for 3 months, they covered my paycheck. They covered some therapy for me. They told me to take as much time as I needed. And after about 2.5 months, I'm like, the silence in the house it's deafening. I got to go back to work. And so they let me come back part-time. And I think that that's unheard of in a lot of organizations, but I would obviously suggest that you give folks who have dealt with or are dealing with a deep loss, no matter what that is, even if it's a divorce, some sort of leniency, because that flexibility actually will come back tenfold. I came back when I finally came back. I put a lot of effort in to this organization that I was working with at the time, because and they didn't do that so that I would come back that way, because they didn't know what was going to happen, obviously. But I came back and I was so grateful that they gave me that flexibility, that I felt like, you know what, I'm going to give them my best too. So it was very powerful. So I wish more organizations would give more flexibility around loss like that.
Hey runners, we all hunt that gear sweet spot, functionality that actually delivers, comfort that never quits, performance that pushes you harder, and pieces that have you looking like the badass you are out there. But the real craving? Gear that straight up disappears. No fiddling, no chafing, just pure flow and the freedom where you can crush your miles. That's where our friends at Path Projects come in clutch. I'm obsessed with their Graves PX running shorts. That independent suspension design is straight wizardry. Baseliner locked in, outer short gliding free, zero rub, zero chafe, and pockets that actually work. And their highly rated designs keep on stacking wins. The Pyrenees hoodie, next to level, T19 magic with the snorkel hood and thumbhole hand protection, perfect for those crisp morning runs or just layering. It runs like a dream and chills like your favorite casual piece. and technical tees, feather light, just pure performance that you forget that you're wearing. Premium everything from an independent crew that gets the runner's life. And as a special thank you, you can use the code TRP10 for 10% off your order for a limited time. Check them out, Path Projects. Whatever your path, enjoy your journey. Eric, a lot of the clients that come to you, I would say they're high achievers.
Yes.
Who define themselves by titles or their output or what they achieve. And then after they experience a loss, you know, they're trying to define how do they come to terms with what enough looks like. Now, juxtapose that into a runner who's out there in the grind, putting in the training, and they're chasing a PR to fill a void that they have. And then they accomplish something, but they realize they're just emptier. You never actually fill the void. What advice would you give those folks?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, filling that void, I think that is almost an assessment of your own grit in those moments, that there's potentially a lesson in there that maybe you haven't figured out. Maybe you're still searching, why didn't I hit that PR? Why didn't I? Well, what am I going to do to train out of that? What am I going to do differently the next time? Because the only way you get better, and we only operate at the highest level of training that we ever have. And so you look at professional athletes like Tiger Woods or Tom Brady, they have coaches. And those coaches aren't there to tell you what you want to hear. They're there to tell you what you need to hear. And one of the biggest things that I've learned over the last probably 10 or 12 years is that when somebody comes to you for a coaching session or a series of coaching sessions, that they're there because they want something. They want to feel better. They want to get over that hump. There's something that they have been trying over and over again. Again, maybe it's a runner who is trying to hit that PR, and they can't. They just can't. There's typically something going on with your mind at that point, right? Something is I have no idea what potentially it could be, because everybody's different, right? But there's something that is preventing you from even operating at 4% higher than anybody else. And that Tom Brady shared that years ago, that, you know, in order for him to become the best quarterback, he just had to be 4% better than every other quarterback out there. Just 4%. That's all it took. And look at what happened with that. And so you see the regimen of training, of nutrition, of just focus. I don't know. You sit there in awe. I mean, like, okay, if that person can beat a personal record, then what do I need to do? What do I need to do differently so that I can hit my own personal record next time and keep breaking those PRs?
It's just, you know what? I was listening just a couple of days ago, and there's so many stories in life, in sport. The difference between Hall of Famers and, you know, the average is in baseball, a couple hits every 10 at bats.
Yeah.
That's all. That still means they're failing most of the time.
Right.
So coming to terms that you're going to fail more than you're going to succeed. So enjoy. I don't know. That's one thing I've learned over my time running, and folks who listen to the Renegade podcast. It's enjoy the daily run, the long run on Saturday. And then the icing on the cake is maybe a race. And even then, there's so many factors at play. The sun loves me, always comes out on race day. It's always windy. Something happens and you just kind of roll with it. So I found removing myself from an outcome, and do you enjoy what you do? Going back to what you earlier said, if a runner, you're listening, if you're working in a corporate life and you truly don't love what you're doing, then absolutely, you got to find something to help to move on, to find that passion. But if you really, truly enjoy what you're doing, enjoy what you're doing and don't enjoy the rating that comes out at the end of the year that says high performance or meet expectation, because whatever. It's just a rating.
Yeah.
But do you enjoy what you're doing? Do you like the people you're
Right.
working with? I find that so interesting, and it's helped me in my life and my running to come to terms with remove outcomes. Outcomes are going to be there, but do you enjoy the process of outcomes
Yes.
and all that fun stuff?
Right. Yeah. I mean, what's the rating at home? You know, your work is one.
I don't know. I should
Right?
ask Jen. Hey, Jen.
Yeah. But that's where I think, again, what matters most.
That's
Your
what
job,
matters most.
you're going to have many jobs in your lifetime, but you're probably only going to have one family. So what rating matters more?
That's right. Absolutely.
So yeah, there's one thing that you just shared that just real quick is, you know, you're talking about performers hitting PRs. There's a book by Daniel Coyle called The Little Book of Talent. If you haven't read it, I would pick that up. The rule number 17 is that struggle is a biological necessity. And it's a very short, literally one paragraph chapter. And he talks about how Wayne Gretzky was learning how to skate. And he wanted to get that edge to be able to turn faster and quicker than anybody else on the ice. And so he would go out on the ice, he would practice turning and, you know, as quickly as he could. And he would lean over, and he would fall and he would slide into the boards. He'd get back up, he'd go to the other end of the ice, and he would do it until he found that edge where he could go over as far as possible before it turned into failure. And the thing with struggle is that it is a biological necessity because we're reaching. That is what makes us stronger. That's what makes us resilient. We had to survive first in order to carry on with the human race. So we're wired for survival. But it's just the same thing as well with runners. They want to hit that PR. It could be a slight little adjustment in the way that their foot plants on the ground before they take off for the next step. That could be the difference between, you know, a 1 second difference in a race or a 1 minute difference in a race to hit that PR. And so you just have to keep going to figure out what that edge is for yourself before the failure. And a lot of people don't do that. They back off from it. I'm never going to hit it. That internal mindset, I'm never going to. Well, what happens if you say, I'm going to figure it out, or I am figuring it out? I think that something shifts inside of you. So now you're not looking at the detractions. You're looking at the solutions. You're looking for the thing that's going to get you to that next step to make you, to make you grow.
I like that. And I think of the old trail adage of the puke and rally. So for trail runners, you're going to feel like shit out there at some point. You're out there for a good 10, 12, 15, 20 hours. You got to puke and then you got to rally.
Hey, you know, back in the 80s, Uta Pippig, you remember Uta Pippig?
I don't remember.
So she was a runner. I think she was German, if I'm not mistaken. There was some road race. Remember back in, I'm in my 50s now, but back in the 70s and the early 80s, there was the ABC Wide World of Sports.
Yes, we remember that, yes.
And so they would run, I think she was doing a triathlon, if I'm not mistaken, or just a road race. But I was watching her, lose bodily functions, both ends. Bill Rogers, famous runner, Bill Rogers. I remember watching a race and he's running. He's keeping this incredible pace. He was up front, and every 20 to 30 steps, he was just, I'm like, I would want to stop personally, but it just speaks to the training. It speaks to that it's a puke and rally. And hey, you're lightening the load, man. You can go faster probably, you know?
Look on the bright side of it. Yeah, lightening the load, less mass to carry.
Yes.
But Eric, I got a question for you now here.
Yes, sir.
P90X.
Yes.
Can we get you into running? That's a good base. That's a good base to get you into running.
It is. Well, I haven't done P90X probably now in about 10 years, if I'm being honest with you. However, I am active in a gym at this point. I go daily. And at 55, I'm lifting heavier than I ever have in my entire life. naturally, of course. I'm not doing any type of testosterone or steroid or anything like that. It's just creatine and pre-workout. It's my favorite mix. Anyway, but I'm also 240 pounds, and I never learned how to run properly. Again, I'm not saying that I wouldn't learn, but ideally for me, I would like to drop about 40 pounds. I have a knee that's not great condition. And so right now, again, with my current running stride, but I have done several Spartan races, and I've absolutely loved it. And
those would be tougher than those. I've seen those. Those would be definitely tougher.
Yeah.
We got to get you on the trails. You could be a trail runner, which means fast walking. Like, remember you mentioned the Mark Sisson episode.
Yes.
Well, his new book,
Born
to Walk. Yeah, Born to Walk. And I'm like, Mark, quiet. That's the secret. We tell everybody we're trail runners, but we're just walking.
It's so funny that you say that, because at least 3 times a week, I'm on I'm either on a trail outside, or during the really tough winter months here, I'm on a treadmill that is, as high incline as it can go, but at 3 miles an hour. And I'm noticing the amount, the calorie burn, but just the cardio, the heart rate getting up to 130, 140. And of course, the more that you do this, when you step off and you finish, your cardio health, if you will, is, how quickly your heart rate drops back down to normal rate, and this is something that, that's kind of a PR that I'm looking for, of how quickly can I get my heart rate to drop? How many minutes does it take? Or typically now it's like 2 to 3 minutes and I'm back down to, baseline. So,
we're calling you a runner. If you're out hiking in the woods, you're a trail runner.
There you go.
Seems like it.
If you got a bear behind you, you're running, man. I'm the thing.
We're all runners then.
Yeah.
So I just had a question too as well with, so earlier we talked about connection with nature and that helping with recovery. And we talked about communication and being around people, and that connection. And I know we're in the digital age and we're distances, but we're able to connect over this kind of medium. But what I was trying to get to is that you are a storyteller, and this is something that it's something that you can also grow into and improve upon. But you must have been, even as a young lad, a storyteller as well. Do you feel that back when you were younger, that you were able to carry people along with you on, an explanation or using the art of the story? Is that something that you've always had, or is that something that you had to work hard to develop?
That's a great question. I think what I've been really good at for a majority of my life is the art of the analogy, metaphors, analogy, helping people to make sense of something that otherwise might not make any sense. I was just having a conversation today with my sister. We found out last week that my dad has Merkel cell carcinoma, which is it's not melanoma and it's not lymphoma, but it basically, with Merkel cell, that's what Jimmy Buffett passed away from a few years ago. But with Merkel cell, there's typically a lesion on your body that is the marker of this cancer in your body. And there's typically a mass in your body but it originates from that lesion, no matter where that lesion is. And so I was talking to my sister today, and I said, it's almost kind of like a lobster trap and a buoy. That if you guys are familiar with lobstering, a lobster trap is a big square rectangular mass, and it's dropped to the bottom of the water, and it rests on the bottom, but there's a rope, and at the top of the rope is the buoy. So in a similar way, that's what Merkel cell is for somebody in their body. And so once you find the marker, that's fine, but typically you find the marker before you find the mass. And so in this case with my dad, they did it the other way around. They found the mass before. So anyway, but yeah, analogy is definitely something that I've been able to share quite well. And it really does take some skill, but let me rephrase this. We are all natural storytellers. We've been telling story before there were words, and in storytelling, 70% is body language. We are wired to see body language. And it's sometimes hard for storytelling over a medium like this because, you might not see all of my body, how I'm standing, how I'm sitting, how I'm postured, but the other 20% is tonality.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part of this storytelling is the 10% is the words that you speak. And so what we're all naturally wired for storytelling, and it's in our DNA. And so, but it is a skill that can be refined and learned to the point where you can help people make the sense of the world around them. And I always go back to that statement that what's personal is universal. So if somebody says, well, I don't really have a story. We all have a story. Well, somebody else has already got the same thing going on. Yeah, but they don't have your experience. They don't have your fingerprint, that unique identifier that makes it yours.
Right.
Which you never know who you can help when you share a story.
Absolutely.
That's why I think your podcast is so important, because you're bringing on these wonderful guests from all walks of life. I started to watch the podcast with the gentleman who was talking about Sasquatch.
Yes.
Jeffrey,
right?
Yes. The
Jeffrey,
late,
right?
he passed away. He was the nicest gentleman in the world. So patient with us. And
yes. We are drawn to the storytelling. We want to know, what is, it helps us to convey meaning in our lives. We just make sense of our world through storytelling. Yeah. Let me give an example. So let's say, for example, you are told one part of a story. Okay. There's a car accident outside, and that's the end of the story. Our brains are like, well, what happened? Mm-hmm. We need the completion of the story. So what we typically do is that we complete the story ourselves, and the brain doesn't like doing that. But 9 times out of 10, the completion of that story is something negative. And so it's really important that when you're sharing a story that there's a conflict, but there's also a resolution, good, bad, or otherwise. But if we don't get that resolution, then it actually irritates us. We don't like it, which is why you think about your kids, when they're, tell me the story again, tell me that same story again, because there's something about it that's resonating with them. And we're all the same way. So yeah.
Absolutely. And then this has led you into the TEDx. Like, how did you, tell us about your first experience with it? That must have been a little bit nerve-wracking, or was it something you were just excited about and you wanted to just launch into?
Well, I when I went through my divorce, I remember, and I'm just going to say this, transparently, I didn't know how to share that experience without it being dumping. I had no coping skills, or the coping skills that I had weren't enough for me to process what I was dealing with at that time. And so I'd sit down and find a coworker. Oh, this is going on, that's going on. Well, we know what that feels like. It's really heavy. And after I lost Zoe and I knew that I wanted to share my story, I knew I didn't want to dump. I just wanted to help people. And that's when I started to learn how important it was that, it heals the brain. Story heals the brain. That's, I think, why TEDx's are so important and so powerful, is because a lot of times they're founded in a origin story. Why are you doing? Why does this matter? Now that's a why that you can answer, right? Why does this matter? Well, what do I do about it? Right? There's always a what in the TEDx as well. So yes, to answer your question, Mark, it wasn't something that I approached. I probably had 26 iterations of the talk. And then once I finally got the last iteration, the final version ready, I probably did about 200 reps before I walked out on the stage. And I remember when the curtain was pulled back, there's a big spotlight. And what it felt like was that I was walking out there. My legs were walking, but my body was trying to go backwards. And I don't know how, as soon as I stepped into that red circle, all of those reps just came and they landed. And I just went on autopilot. And I remember a certain point through the first TEDx where something kind of shifted in me. I'm like, let's have fun. Let's play. Because I knew it. I knew what I was going to say. And I just saw a different, I kind of relaxed into it and I really had the message. This is really important. I went out there, I'm like, this is really important for anybody who's struggling with loss, that they have to know that there is life beyond losing somebody and that we don't have to stay in that survival mode forever.
Isn't that grit in action?
Yes.
The curtain's open. You get faced with that reality. You take that step forward. And then the practice. It's not like anyone's born naturally gifted in this way. You said it was versions and versions of practice, and then you fall and you rely on that practice.
Yeah. And that the practice is really important no matter what it is. I mean, think about when we are in grade school, the practice is the homework right before the test, right? When we're working in corporate America, the practice is, learning a new skill in order to be competent in the role that you're in. And for a runner, the practice is running and running to the point where they're getting stronger. They're able to manage their breath better. They're able to manage their energy levels better. And then you start to see time getting shaved off. And again, I am not a runner. So if
you're
I'm
a runner
out of turn, you can tell me that I'm wrong and I'm okay with that. But
you're doing really good with the running analogies. We'll give you credit for that. Full points.
Thanks. But I think it's the same in the paradigm is applicable in every aspect of life, right? Practice is so essential. And I think that, you can't just say, I'm going to be a TEDx speaker, right? Have AI write you a script and expect to stand on the stage. You got to practice the performance, the voice, the tonality, the breathing, the pace. You're not just standing there looking straight forward, you're moving around. And every action is intentional when you're standing in a red circle, even if it's 8 minutes, even if it's 12 minutes, every action, every word is intentional. That's, I think, was very surprising with that process. It was scary, but it was exhilarating to go through it, and tough because you just want that message to be exactly right.
And have you been approached for TEDx coaching as well now?
Not for TEDx coaching, no. But I typically walk my clients through a story creation process that really helps them to have the edge over somebody who says, hey, I've got this thing that I think you might like. So storytelling is a great way of breaking down a trust barrier and building trust very quickly. Because again, what's personal is universal. And so you just never know, again, who's maybe has to hear that on that particular day or that particular moment and change their life. After I did my first TEDx, I had a couple people come up to me afterwards and they were, sharing the same thing. And they lost a loved one to suicide years ago, or they had a friend who lost someone. And so it helped them to cope in that moment. When I did my second TEDx last year, at the end of the event, a woman came up and she was just crying because she had just lost her husband. And she was asking the same things that, this Zoe's friend was asking, maybe I shouldn't be here anymore. Because if I can't have my friend or my husband, I don't want to be here. And so she resonated with some of the things that I shared. But it was enough to help her to be like, you know what? No, I have to be here because my family is still here. They still want me around and I love them and I want to be here for them. So yeah, you just never know when a story is going to change somebody's trajectory in an instant.
Absolutely.
Well, Eric, we just got to thank you for sharing your story in a way that's impactful, but also a lesson that we could all learn from of how to keep moving forward. So we just thank you for joining us on the Renegade on this episode.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation, fantastic questions, and I hope this helps somebody who's navigating loss or a setback to find a way forward. That you're not done yet,
No,
you're not done yet.
And I think what you've said just continues to resonate is what's personal is universal. And we all can, doesn't matter who you are, you can take that away in everyday interactions with people, helping somebody through something difficult, something even whether you're celebrating something or helping, there's a space for that. So again, Eric, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful. And I hope we can have you back on at some point in time too as well. So
yeah, thank you. I would absolutely love that. Thank you guys.
And
Appreciate
Eric, and where can folks find you? Find more about?
So there's a couple places that you can find me on Instagram. I'm at the Grit Guy, all one word. And then if you, I do have a website. It's www.thegritguy.com, where I share how I can help you go from employee to entrepreneur.
excellent.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Life can be hard, and we like to say the Renegade Podcast can help. You know what also can help? Something truly transformative? Jesse Itzler's Running Man Festival. This isn't just an event. It's a 3-day immersion at Kingston Downs in Rome, Georgia, where you craft your own running adventure, sweat it out in the saunas, flow through yoga, absorb wisdom from world-class speakers, and vibe to live music under the stars. It's about recalibrating your mind, your body, and spirit in a community of like-minded souls, pushing boundaries. Jesse, if this resonates across the ether, I'm putting it out there. We'd be honored to join the tribe in September, sharing stories and inspiration. And if you're tuned in and you're connected to Jesse, whisper a kind word our way. Let's co-create this. Let's manifest. Dive deeper at runningmanfestival.com and connect with the Renegade. We're on YouTube, Instagram, on X, or shoot us an email, runegadepodcast@gmail.com. For more on endurance, mindset, and the path less traveled, stay tuned, stay inspired. We thank you for listening to the Renegade Podcast. Each episode, we dare to practice the lost art of conversation to better understand this thing we call life and the human connection that we have with running and endurance sport. If you enjoy the Renegade Podcast, could we ask for a favor? Head on over to our YouTube and click subscribe and like our podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your engagement helps keep the Renegade Podcast growing and going. If you have a show idea, a comment, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email, runegadepodcast@gmail.com. That's RUNEGADE podcast@gmail.com. We have a great list of guests coming up that we're looking forward to sharing another conversation with you. Head on over to our link tree, check out our sponsors, our friends of the podcast. We have great discount codes that, thanks to them, they're offering you, the Renegade listeners, to save some money on the best running gear, apparel, fuel, and nutrition. We thank you for listening. And remember, in a world of runners, be a renegade.